Every time you subset a vector or a data frame, essentially you run some code to select one or more members of the object under a specific complex condition. For instance, in the last line of code that we saw in the last video, we asked for those rows that satisfy one of the two conditions, or both. Either those rows where the column glc_part1 is less than 12, or glc_part2 is more than 13. In other words, moving through each row of the data frame, two conditions are checked. If either one or both of these conditions are true, then the respective row is stored and will be displayed along with all the other lines that satisfy these two conditions. So, subsetting is a kind of conditional selection of rows. Now, aside from the conditional selection, the scenario where you ask R to run some code and do something useful if a specific condition is met is very common. For example, if a student has performed poorly on the reading task and scored under 10 out of 15, then I would probably like to add that score to the student's scores in the other tasks, listening, writing, and speaking, for instance, and then I would probably want to compare it with the average sum of scores of the rest of the students. In terms of R programming, you simply need to know how to execute code under a condition. In this example, the condition is that the student should have a score less than 10 out of 15. And if that condition holds, you ask R to go ahead and do the sum of the scores from the 4 modules and compare it with the average of the sums of the other students. Let's try to find a way to represent how the conditional execution for that example would play out. I could use some kind of pseudo language and express conditional execution like this. If and then could be our primitives of the language. What is inside the parentheses is where we express the condition that has to be true before the commands inside the curly braces can be executed at all. If the condition is not true, then the commands within the curly braces are not executed, and instead, the next command after the block of code within the curly braces is executed. Now, let's take a much simpler example this time and use the pseudo-language construct that we saw to turn our conditional pseudocode into actual R code. Suppose we have a variable x that is assigned the value 4. And the condition we would like to check is that if x has a value less than 5, then we would like to have R print out on the console the message the number x is small. After the conditional block of code, I will simply add the print statement that prints out on the console the message this is the next line. As you can see, the word if in R is considered a keyword and is colored differently to indicate that it has a special meaning. So the condition is checked and it is true. That is why the code within the curly braces is executed. Notice that the code written here within the curly braces is placed with an indentation from the edge of the line on the left. However, this does not make any difference when you want to run the code. It's just the same. The only thing that matters is that the code that is supposed to be executed if the condition is true is placed within the curly braces. The indentation simply eases the readability of the code and indirectly suggests that the code is executed conditionally and differs from the rest of the code that is normally placed with no indentation. Notice that the RStudio editor automatically colored the keyword if, closed parentheses, and curly braces and created indentation for me within the curly braces. These are some of the conveniences when you use the RStudio editor that you cannot find in any other simple text editor. Now, what happens if the condition is not satisfied? For example, let me change the direction of the sign in the parentheses. So now that the condition is not satisfied, the code in the curly braces is skipped and the next line is executed. Within the parentheses, you can express any complex condition you can ever imagine. using the logical operators that you're familiar with when you learn to do complex subsettings on vectors and data frames in earlier videos. Recall that the logical operators return a Boolean value, either true or false. So I could write down an if statement with a disjunctive condition like this. What this says is that if x is either equal to 5 or greater than 15, then print out the string x is exactly what I was looking for. Otherwise, move on to the next line of the script and print out the message this is the next line as earlier. As you can see, in our case, since x is assigned the value 4, none of the two conditions is met. I could also compare two strings for equality with the use of the double equal sign. Here I'm assuming that the variable str1 takes its value from a database or from an interaction with the user. Or check whether a string is a substring of another string by using the output of the grepl function. What grepl does is that it compares whether the string in its first argument is found as part of the string in the second argument. In our case, whether the string stored in the variable str1 is a substring of the string Alexandros. As you can see, grepl returns a Boolean value, true in our case, and it can perfectly fit within the parentheses of an if statement. Let's create the if statement. Now I want to have the message your name is either Alex or Alexandros printed out. Practically, any type of logical comparison that has as its result a true or a false value can take its place within the parentheses, and if the result of the evaluation of the expression within the parentheses is true, then the following block of code is executed. Otherwise, the lines following the curly braces are run. Being able to know how to write conditional code in R is important for conducting any type of language data analysis scenario, as you may suspect. Before moving on to more complex type of conditionals, here are a few simple coding exercises to get the hang of conditionals in R. I will include the solution on the video description below. Get comfortable with if statements and work some problems on your own, and you can by all means send your questions or comments in the comments section below. Until next time, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. Take care and write some R code.